Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into a Guardian Raid guide for Lost Ark. I'm going to be going through all the Guardian Raids in the game and then catching up with the ones that have been released. And as we released, moving through those. So what I'd like to do for the first one, since most of these in the first tier are pretty simple, I'm going to lump all of the level 1 Guardian Raids together into one video. This includes Ur'nil, Lumerus, Icy Legoros, and Vertus. I think of these, the only one that's really takes a little practice is going to be Vertus. The others are very straightforward, and they introduce you into reading body position and patterns for bosses and teach you how to play your character against bosses. But realistically, none of these bosses, I wouldn't even consider Vertus to be in that group of needing an entire video just for them. So we're gonna go through each of the bosses. I'm assuming that if you're looking for this kind of video, you're brand new to Lost Ark, you're checking out the Guardian Raids, or maybe you just want to know how the Guardian Raids work. We're starting with the first 4 in the game. So let's get started. But first, if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Who knows? I might even be streaming right now. Starting first with Ur'nil, or I guess jokingly called Ur'nil, by some folks in the other regions for the game. This is the first Guardian Raid you're going to run into. He is a big old bear with black and red fur and armor, and he is just about as simple as it gets once you know how Guardian Raids go. So this is I think Ur'nil is a great introduction into Guardian Raid mechanics. So we're not going to spend too much time on him, but we'll go through the general basics for this character. The first tip I have for Ur'nil is that he is very easily one of the most linear bosses in the game. So what I mean by that is the only real danger zones for Ur'nil are going to be in front of him and behind him, and most of that honestly is in front of him. He doesn't really have any major side attacks. Most of the movement that he does is pretty straightforward. So if you are a person who is a true ranged character, doesn't care about back attack, front attack, then your safest locations are going to be on the side of him. But of course, not everyone is true ranged like a sorceress or a sharpshooter. You're going to have to deal with the front attacks and the back attacks for Ur'nil. Most of the time, it's very telegraphed. You'll see him either do a jump forward and do a ground attack in front, or he'll do a swipe attack. So the one he's doing right now, he'll start with his hand going up, and then he'll do this kind of major attack zone right in front of him like this. This is a pretty long animation, so once you see him start doing it, you'll definitely want to just go ahead and punish him for that. In both enraged form and regular form, he does a jump attack, which is relatively straight, but the way you recognize the jump attack is when his shoulders drop and his head gets down to the ground. So when these things drop down here and his head gets low, he's about to jump forward, and it's a pretty short hop, but there's then an AoE that lands right out there in front of him. He will usually almost always do this 2 times in a row. However, when enraged, he can do it 3 or 4 times in a row. And that looks like this. He'll do a jump forward and slam, usually turn, and then do another one if he has it on it. And then if he's enraged, he can do it multiple times. He's also particularly easy to counter, as most of the time he just turns blue and stands still. So it looks like this. We'll see him turn blue and stand still. You give him plenty of time to counter. He doesn't have any animation prior to the counter, so you just kind of see him turn blue and you counter him. When he's enraged, there's 2 attacks actually you need to be aware of. The first one is going to be a long charge attack. So right there, when you see him rear up his head, and he has to be enraged for this, which you can tell by his glowing eyes and the red glow around his back horns. But he'll actually take this posture where he'll take his head and move it up and roar. And then he's going to do a very long sequence dash with multiple attacks. This is highly punishable, so you can just jump in behind him and start beating him up. Just be aware that if you're in front of him like I am here, and he rears his head up and roars, he's about to do a very extended, long animation dash that we'll want to show. Which looks like this. Then he'll do 1 attack, another attack, and then he'll do a combo at the end of it. Very easily punished. And really the last attack you need to be aware of for Ur'nil is going to be when he's enraged. Again, he's glowing like this. He'll do a ball attack. So what'll happen is he'll spawn this ball farther away. So you can see that the ball is right over here. He's standing here. What'll happen is he'll bring this ball closer in front of him, right in front of him. And then he'll do this lifting throw attack, which will throw the ball up over his head. Now he actually has someone targeted when he's doing this. So where the ball goes behind him will vary based on who he's targeting for this attack. But what will happen is if you are standing in front of him and you get hit by the lift up, he'll throw you up behind him with the ball. And if you're standing behind him, the ball will land and then do an area and explosion when it lands. So just be aware that when he does this attack and you see the orb spawn, you don't want to be, again, you don't want to be in front of him and you don't want to be behind him because you'll deal damage. And keep in mind, because this ball is targeting someone, if it's targeting someone way back here, the ball will fly all the way back to that location. If he's targeting someone right behind him, it'll go straight up and then land back down and deal damage right behind him. So just be aware that he's targeting someone for this. And if you're standing right behind him, you may be safe, you may not be. And put together, it looks like this. So he'll throw the ball up over his head and it'll land on someone. If you're behind, you'll get knocked down and take damage from it. And that's really all there is to say about Ur'nil. Let's move on to the next. The next Guardian to talk about is Lumerus. He is a white tiger with golden armor floating over his head. And he is a little bit more mechanically difficult than Ur'nil. He does have some AoE attacks and some things to know. So let's jump into what you need to know in order to face Lumerus. Lumerus has tons of front attacks, cones, and circular AoEs. The safest spot to face off against him is going to be behind him for 2 of his attacks and for many of his cleaves and breaths as well. The first thing to know is going to be this attack right here. So let's roll this back so we can look at it a little bit more closely. So what will happen is he will start to lean down. And if you ever see a long animation, in my mind, I think of it as him. I have dogs, so it's like he's shaking his fur. But when his head goes down and then you see him lift up and slowly shake it as he lifts up and there's nothing going on, it means he's about to do his big AoE pizza attack. And it'll create an AoE that looks like this. It goes all the way around him, but then there's a dead zone right behind him. So for this attack, and there's one other that has the same kind of shape, but you want to go, when you see him do this animation, you want to stand directly behind him to avoid getting hit. So let's go ahead and play it in normal speed so we can see what that looks like. He'll do the little shake, and then he'll do impulses. He'll shake that whole area. You can see that everyone standing behind him is perfectly safe. He also does melee attacks in front of him, which are very telegraphed. He'll lift his right paw up and slam it down in front of him, which is very easy to avoid, but it does have a nice hitbox to it. If you ever see him glow white and kneel down, he'll actually put his paws out on the sides here and put his head down. He's about to do a breath attack in front of him. So he creates this cone in front of him. Just don't be standing in this cone attack area and you will be just fine. It looks just like this. It's actually not that big of a cone considering how big the Guardian cone attacks become later on. Now he does also have a counterable charge. You'll see him turn blue and move forward. There's one easy tell to look at when you're seeing him charge. This is just before Lumerus charges, and you can see that his front paws are facing forward. What he does before he turns blue, and a lot of Guardians are like this, where they'll have a special animation that starts before they're actually counterable, so you can actually tell that they're about to do a charge attack that can be countered before they even do it. What Lumerus does, and he does it only for this charge attack, is he'll take his paw, his left paw, and he'll move it back, and then he'll start scratching the ground with it. Almost like he's rearing up, ready to go. He'll start scratching the ground. So let's look at that in normal speed so we can see what that looks like. He'll bring his paw back right there. And then before he's even turned, now he's turning blue. Then he scratches the ground a few times and then he goes. So if you ever see his paw move before he turns blue, if he turns blue, you know he's about to do a charge attack. And it's just a linear charge that goes forward and you want to just get out of the way there. Next act to be aware of is this one right here where he slams in either direction and then he'll do these two things. Then he uses this perfect semicircle area attack in front of him. And there's an easy tell for this. So right before he does it, he will drop his left shoulder. So you'll see his left shoulder here drop down and he'll almost lean towards his left and then look to the right. When he does that, he's about to do this slam attack. So then you'll see it. You'll get hit by this. Just make sure that when this happens, you can see the circle and semicircle in front of him. It comes from either of his paws and it's full forward from there. So as long as you're behind his paws on anywhere behind him before he slams down, you're good to go. And as you get later into the fight, he will start creating deployables on the ground. And there's two different ways this shows up. The first is just like this. So what'll happen is he'll lean up on his hind legs. You'll see his body kind of go vertical. And then he'll slam down and then he'll rear his head up and then start breathing into the ground. This will create little deployables around the area and the map that deal damage and cause a slight knockback. And what's important about this one, which can actually be quite punishing if you're not aware, is you can get trapped between them. He got taunted by the gun lancer there. You'll see him rear his head up, throw the breath into the ground, and then these deployables will show up. So what can happen, especially if you're a back attack or melee class, you can see there's a deployable here, and a deployable here. These can actually end up being close enough where if you're the person standing in the middle, you can get volleyballed around. So you want to be very careful, especially as a melee class, that if you're standing behind Lumerus looking for back attacks and he starts to do this breath attack into the ground, just kind of be aware of your surroundings and make sure there aren't little patches spawning underneath you and then they start knocking you around, or you just get caught inside of them, because they can deal significant damage. And if you get ping pong too much, they can deal a lot. Once you get him into phase 2, you start getting his health lower. Some of his attacks will spawn these on their own. So you can see this attack that he just did with the 2 portals on the side and the slam. When he does this, when he's in his later stages, you can see the deployables are spawning all over the ground. So you just want to be careful that this can spawn even when he's not doing the breath attack. And the last attack to be aware of is the second pizza slice attack that he does, and it's very devastating. The first one looks like this, where he rears his head up. The second one starts with an attack as well. So he's gonna lean down, jump up into the air, and you can see me dash away immediately, recognizing his body position there. He does 2 stages of this attack. He'll leap up and he'll land on the ground, and then pizza slice, he'll slam the ground and do an AoE around him. So if you're right on top of him when he lands, he will do a bunch of damage to you, and then he'll land. You can see the AoE damage there. And then while he's doing this little glow up where he's growing and doing the AoE damage, that's when you want to get behind him and prevent the damage from getting you. It's another dead zone right behind him. So there's the slam, avoid the landing, and then stand right behind him, get inside that pizza slice, and you're good to go. And that's basically all attacks you need to be aware of. Get through all those and burn him down. He's a pretty easy boss to pick up once you understand how the game works and you're getting more comfortable with your character. Next, let's talk Icy Legoros. This guy isn't all that challenging. I would say he's more annoying than anything else. He spends a lot of time in the air and has some hard CCs as well, so he can be rather punishing depending on your class and how difficult it is to land your damage. But he is pretty straightforward, so let's run through his abilities. A theme with Legoros is going to be jumping. So right here, if you ever see him do this animation where he brings his front 2 claws, paws, whatever you want to call them, back, and then he runs his head up in the air and he roars. What he's going to do is he's going to lift off and disappear off the screen. Then he's going to choose a landing location based on who he has targeted. You can see based on who he has targeted at the current moment. And then he will just land right back down and do a big AoE with a marker. So if you see him rear up like this and bring his head up, you know that he's about to do that attack. He'll just jump up. Looks like he's targeting me. You just get out of the way and he'll get hit because it does damage and it knocks you back as well. And similar in that vein is another jump attack. You'll see him lean towards someone, and right there, let's bring it back so we can look at it a little bit better. So he will slam his front 2 paws into the ground. So right here, he's about to start this attack. So you see him land up and then boom, you can see the effects coming in front of him. He'll slam his 2 paws in the ground, and then he's going to do a 3-point jump attack. The first to jump is pretty quick, lands and does damage, lands and does damage, waits. This one goes much further and lands and knocks back and does damage as well. The distance he can cover with the first 2, if he's sitting here, he can go from like here to here. They're pretty short hops. And then the third one, which is the super jump, he can actually get some pretty serious distance on it. So if he's chasing you, you're being targeted by this attack, you can just run or you can dodge when he lands. But honestly, running is probably the best strategy, where you can just walk away from him while he's doing it and he shouldn't be able to hit you. Now, the next important thing for Icy Legoros is this situation right here. You can see that he is facing forward and a lot of people are standing behind him. He has an attack that is very telegraphed and very easy to see. What he will do is he will spin around, little spinny dervish, land behind him, and then do a breath attack. It's very linear, straight out in front of him. If you get caught in this breath attack, it will stun you. So you will get frozen and he'll jump. So he'll do like a little roar. He'll spin back and breathe. If you're in it, you can see people get stunned there. And he'll punish you if he has you targeted. Easy way to see this is you have plenty of time to do it. If you ever see him turn around and spin, just go ahead and go to the side. It's a very linear attack and pretty easy to avoid. Also, a good thing to note is that every character in the game, all of your movement abilities, your spacebar, has CC immunity on it. So if you get breathed on the second you dash or do your move, then you will avoid the stun. He's also just like Lumerus, so that before he dashes, he will look at a target and then scratch the ground. So you'll see him rear up, and then see the little paw movement right there. He'll rear up as he's doing the target, and then he'll do a movement like right there, and then he does the dash, and he'll do it again. He can do his dash up to 3 times in a row, but his left paw will land on the ground and scratch it before he does the dash. So here he's not counterable, but that's an easy way to tell he's about to dash. Now, once you stagger him, a full stagger is not one you counter, but when you break his stagger meter and he falls down, there's one thing to be aware of, in that he does a stand-up attack. So when he goes down, a full stagger, you'll get a little bit of time to just slam into him and deal a bunch of damage. But when he gets up, he'll slam the ice and do an AoE all around him. And he does this every time he stands up. So just be wary of that. If once you're done with a full stagger, make sure you walk away, because then he's going to slam the ground and he's going to show you what's what if you're standing there when he's going it. So he gets up, does a little glow, and then there's the big slam attack. So just be wary that every time he gets up from a full stagger, he will do that attack, and he can randomly do it when he's low HP as well. And that's really all there is to Icy Legoros. Let's go to the big baddie, the true real fight in a level 1 L1 Guardian Raids, Vertus. He always reminds me of like a frosty Tigrex, just because he's more brute wyvern, but he is tough. He does a lot of damage. He was recently nerfed. His tail swipe used to stun. They took the stun away. They got rid of some of the damage as well from that. But he actually, the reason he's so tough is a lot of his attacks have massive reach and range. And they're also super punishing, and a lot of his attacks as well, he doesn't have a lot of windows where you can punish him. So let's go through his attacks and talk about how you can defeat Vertus. First thing to know is he doesn't really have very many safe zones. First of all, his tail is a big weapon for him. So he will end up creating huge damage zones all around the back of him. Anywhere in here, you can get hit by his tail swipes or his spin attacks or his slams. So if you're a back attack class, like I'm playing a Deathblade here, you'll be wary about standing behind him. However, you also want to be wary about standing anywhere from his front paws forward. The reason being is that he has this breath attack that he will breathe in first, and he'll suck you in and do small stagger on that breathe in and deal damage to you, and then he'll do a breath out afterwards, which knocks you back and deals damage. So if you're anywhere by his front paws or forward, you can get sucked in when he does the breath attack, and it's super punishing. So you have to be careful being honestly anywhere near him. He's got crazy range on a lot of his attacks. Now he has a tail swipe, which no longer stuns, it just deals damage, and then he's got a full circle spin attack. Both of those have very similar warning signs they're about to happen. The easiest way to tell for that is to look at his head and to look at his neck. If he's about to do a tail attack, what he'll do is he'll take his head and he'll drop it down into his right shoulder, and then he'll lean very close to the ground. You'll see him almost level out with the ground, and he'll kind of look backwards and look towards his tail. That means he's about to either do a tail attack, which swipes like this, or he's about to do a full spin where he'll do damage all around him. In both cases, you just want to be wary of that and step away. So you'll see that right here. He's about to do it right before he does it. You'll see him step his paws. He's leaning his head down and down on his shoulder. And he's looking back at his tail, and then he does his spin attack. He'll do the same thing for the tail swipe when he does that as well. So if you're a back attack class, you want to be very careful about that. Let's look at the tail swipe. You'll see him again. He'll drop his head. He'll lean further back, and then he'll look back at his tail, and then he'll do the tail swipe, which deals damage to people that are standing behind him and to the side that he's looking at. Next is his charge attack, and he's a little bit more favorable, a little bit more fair than most Guardians. He has an animation that he will build up prior to being counterable, and we'll see that right here. So what'll happen is he'll lurch up, roar, lean his head up into the air, and then he'll be counterable and then start the charge. You'll see him lean up, he's yelling, turns counterable right then and there, and then he'll go into the dash. So he goes pretty quick from the point that he becomes counterable, but he does have a tail animation right before. So again, look for when he stands still, his body language doesn't change much, but his head will go up. He'll lean up and kind of wiggle a little bit here, and then he'll roar and then dash forward. So you just want to be aware of his positioning. If you ever see him do that, then he'll turn counterable, and you just want to be aware that that's going to be a dash. So either counter it if you're in front of him, or get out of the way. Next, let's see that breath attack in action. So coming in here, and again, I remind you that the front, anywhere from his front paws and forward, is a dangerous place to stand because of this breath attack. But let's look at it first to see what it looks like. He'll breathe in, which does staggered damage to you, pulls you in, and then breathes out. And it covers, honestly, more than the VFX show. You'll see a little bit of this effect here that goes the area. You can still get pulled in if you're on the sides here. It's honestly pretty unfair, but you get pulled in, and then when he's done, he gets pulled out. So again, you just generally want to avoid being in front of him. It's much easier to deal with his tail or to be on his side. But if you're in front and you get pulled in by that stagger, you can just get blown back very easily. Here's a good clip of watching his head movement in order to see if he's going to spin or tail swipe. So right here, you can see I'm standing behind him dealing damage with Deadeye on the shotgun. And then as soon as I see that his head, again, drops to his bottom right shoulder, I'll immediately run, step away from the swipe, come back. He does it again. So you can see his head dropping. He has a tail swipe. You back up and you just keep hitting. Whether you're a back attack class or a ranged class, just be wary of his head. And when he drops his shoulder, you know he's about to do a sweep. His grab is probably one of his most threatening attacks. It used to be far worse before they nerfed it recently in one of the 2 patches ago. They nerfed it so the damage went way down, but this one is more or less unavoidable. If you're the target of the grab, he will just turn towards someone and grab them. You can see that he'll pick them up in his right hand, and then what he'll do is he'll start spinning and slamming them. He'll actually, I think, do almost a full circle where he'll spin around and just periodically slamming the target that he's holding into the ground. And then eventually, if you don't stagger him, he will pick a direction, walk in that direction with the person, stop at a location, and then throw them up into the air and breathe them away. It used to do far more damage, and most of the time it used to be a death sentence if you didn't get staggered out of this. So the counter for this is for your teammates to stagger him. So when he's in this situation where he's doing the drag and spinning around, that's when you want to dump all your stagger abilities, being careful not to get stepped on, right? Because if you stand here and you know he's going to slam, he can deal damage to you and knock you down. So just make sure you're dumping all your stagger into him when he's doing this. And then you'll be able to break the person out that's being held. You can see me step back a little bit there to avoid, but you just want to put as much stagger into him as you can. If you get the stagger, he'll drop the player. No harm, no foul. Just a little bit of damage there, and you'll be able to take him out. And the last big scary attack is when he goes under the ice. And this is probably actually one of the worst ones in the game because you get very little feedback. So what he'll do is he'll lean up into the air. He'll take his front paws off the ground. Front claws off the ground. So he'll take those feet up and he'll lift up in the air. You'll see him kind of almost go vertical for a second. Then he'll slam his feet into the ground and then he'll go under the ice. And so that looks like this. So again, you'll see him jump up, his feet come off the ground, which rarely happens unless he does the spin attack. Then he'll jump up into the air and submerge. So now you have a bit of a pickle. Unless you know who he's targeting, he's going to go under the ice. And unlike Nakrasina, he actually doesn't show anything on the ground on where he is. Generally for this, I recommend people just get distance from where he is. But you'll get he'll just pop out of the ground and do a giant AoE when he lands. So when you see him do that attack, try to get some distance, be ready to dash, make sure your dash is on cooldown, use shields if you can. But generally just going away from him helps avoid the slam when he comes out of the ice. And that's it for Vertus. He's very punishing if you don't pay attention to your positioning or you don't stagger when he does it. He's got a bunch of annoying hops and spins and breath attacks. And a lot of his attacks had wide range. So in this fight, generally, you have plenty of time to kill him. Just be very wary of where you're standing. Based on your class, be wary of what you're doing and just learn to read the body language on what he's about to do and how he's doing it so that you can avoid it when he does it. And then when he does things like submerge or the breath attack, just be very wary of where you're standing and what you're doing. So you can see even here, I pulled him far away from where he was, and then I saved my dash for the second he exited the ice. Then you can avoid the damage there and just be able to pay attention to what he's doing. And you got him. He's definitely a hurdle if you're brand new to the game and you're still figuring it out. But you can get there, and it's very useful to learn how to fight these guardians because later on the guardians are far more challenging. And they do rely on your skills you'll pick up with these. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.